Welcome to The Third Story. I'm Leo Sidran, coming to you from the kitchen in the condo in Zihuatanejo, Mexico. Amanda, come closer. Say hello.
Hola.
Today I'm talking to Victoria Canal. You don't have to stay anymore if you don't want to.
Oh, but I liked Victoria.
I did too. Victoria is a 21-year-old Spanish-American LGBTQ differently abled singer-songwriter with a massively powerful message of diversity, inclusion, and belonging. That's how she was presented to me.
That sounds right.
That is a lot to take in, I thought. She's 21. Okay, so all things considered, especially in the universe of this podcast, she's young. I mean, it's been a minute since either you or I was 21.
Like a minute.
Just a quick minute. So she's young, but she's already an experienced performer and spokesperson, public speaker and creator. She's been developing a career for years, but she's only 21.
Yeah, she had me in tears in like 3 minutes.
That's exactly right. Let's go off script here for a second, Amanda. That's the whole thing about her, is that she has an old soul.
She really does.
I mean,
you went to the bathroom and left us alone for 3 minutes. It opened with she liked my bangs and my beanie, and by the end of 3 minutes, we were hugging and in tears.
This is why I need you on the podcast more, Amanda.
Can't always get what we want.
I know. She's Spanish-American. So what does that mean? In her case, it means that her mother is American and her father was born in Cuba and emigrated to Spain as a young boy. Amanda, don't go too far, please. I need you now. And Victoria, while she sounds and seems American, was actually raised all over the world. She was born in Germany, raised in various countries, and really only came to the States in her late teens. Did you know that? That as American as she seems, she was not raised in America.
Yeah, you shared that with me.
I did share that with you. I share most things with you. She's a singer-songwriter, and in fact, she's a multi-instrumentalist. She plays piano and guitar and has a voice that's both a perfect vehicle for a pop song, but also has a depth and a maturity to it that reveals her early love of jazz. She appears as a backing vocalist from time to time, like for my recent guest, Caleb Hawley, and we even saw her last week on the Oscars.
We did. That was exciting.
I mean, it is exciting when you see somebody you know on the Oscars.
Totally.
Especially someone as young and talented as Victoria Canal.
She deserves it.
She released an EP in 2016 called Into the Pull and a series of singles since then that have racked up millions of Spotify streams, which is not something that I usually focus on. But again, she's a very DIY person and it's impressive. And she's set to release her next EP later this spring, but has already put out 2 singles. The first, Drama, came out in December, right before we talked. And the second, called Second, came out last week. Her writing is direct, commercial, and compelling. She's differently abled. She was born with part of an arm missing. And as she tells me, everybody's born with something. And for me, that's one of the many imperfections about me, but it's the one that people can see. And she also said to me, I feel like I was born with a personality that is eager to connect with people, to get out there and do something deliciously brave. Here's what I felt after meeting and talking to her, and it's what you alluded to before. Everything about Victoria Canal is completely exceptional, from her life experience to her demeanor and her talent. And at the same time, maybe her greatest gift is her empathic, generous spirit. She's just a good listener and incredibly seems to make people feel comfortable to be who they are. It's like she spent so much time as an outsider in her life, moving from country to country, school to school, with a different kind of childhood and a different kind of body and a different kind of talent, that the outside became a kind of inside for her. And she has a way of making you feel like an insider when you're around her. That was my feeling. I'm 43. She's 21. I felt like we were old friends.
I can get with that.
Third-story.com is the place to go, Amanda, to sign up, subscribe, check out the Spotify playlist and the videos of Victoria that I put up, including her new single, Second. And while you're there, you can check out past episodes. For example, the recent conversations I had with her friends and occasional collaborators like Ari Herstand, who plays the role of the makeup artist in her music video for Drama, and Caleb Hawley, and Theo Katzman. These are some trying times. We know this. If you have some extra coins jingling in your pocket, honestly, I think you should give them to the nonprofit organization of your choosing. But if after you've done that, you still have more left over, then it's time for Patreon. Patreon.com/thirdstorypodcast, where you can support this project on a deeper level. Here it is, my conversation with the incredible, inspirational, insightful Victoria Canal. So your father, I read, is actually Cuban.
Well, he was born in Cuba,
Yeah.
but in 1961, he left with his parents to Spain. They were exiled.
So he seems Spanish.
He speaks like a Spaniard, and my grandparents speak like Cubans.
And where were you born?
I was born in Munich.
Right. You have all these cities on your...
Under my belt. Yeah.
Under your belt, on your resume, in your biography. It's a little bit of a mystery. You come with so much backstory.
Yeah, kind of crazy. I feel like for 21 years old, I've covered a lot of ground, you know?
You're 21 years old.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's open-ended, but tell me the story. You were born in Munich, then what?
Well, to give the traveling some context, my mom grew up in a small town in the mountains of Georgia, and my dad grew up in a small town in the outskirts of Barcelona. And when they met, neither of them had really seen much of the world, but they loved cycling. So they fell in love and decided to go on a worldwide cycling trip together. And along the way, they got pregnant earlier than planned. They ended up switching gears and getting their business degrees to choose work based off travel, so that they really implemented this philosophy of getting us to see the world early on because they hadn't gotten to. So I was born in Munich. My oldest brother was born in Spain, and my middle brother was born in Switzerland.
And are you oldest or youngest?
I'm the youngest one, and the only girl. And we moved around I lived in Shanghai, Tokyo, Dubai, Madrid, Barcelona, Amsterdam, London.
And this was because they had this desire to show you the world. They wanted you to know the world because they felt that they had been somehow isolated.
Yeah, exactly.
How do you feel when people ask you where you're from or what your cultural identity is? How do you feel?
I always feel like I'm about to annoy them with a long answer. It's like there's no easy answer for it. And I don't want to sound pretentious either. So sometimes I just say where I live and keep it at that. I live in LA. Keep it simple. Or I say I'm Spanish American. And if they ask more questions, then I'll go deeper into it. But it can be a little bit exhausting to go through the whole thing every time, you know.
And it's interesting to say Spanish American because that actually can mean so many different things to different people.
So many different things, yeah. Spanish immigrants grew up in America, for example.
Totally. And in your case, a few of the implications apply to you. I mean, your father is Cuban, which is kind of closer to this immigrant story that we're most accustomed to hearing, Cuba or Mexico or something that's like closer geographically to the United States. But actually, he came here by way of Spain. I mean, he's Spanish.
He doesn't even live here. He lives in Amsterdam.
He lives in Amsterdam.
Yeah, my parents live in Amsterdam. I didn't live in the United States until 2 years ago.
Really?
Yeah. My mom and I had come to stay with my grandparents in Georgia so that I could pursue music while doing online school. And we went on an open mic tour. So for 30 days, we traveled up the East Coast so that we could see some of the United States and I could get a feel for performing and see if it's really what I wanted to do. And it all worked out.
So where'd you go to high school?
I did high school online. It's a program called K12.com. So I did 9th grade we were living in Dubai. And I did high school, 9th grade there. And there was a teacher, his name was Matthew. And he was in charge of the recording studio at the school. There was quite a full-fledged recording studio. It was super fancy for no reason. Nobody used those resources except for me. I was the only student who wanted to use that studio. I had a big crush on my teacher. I was like 14 or 15. And he showed me the ropes of like recording and Logic. And I loved not only being around this really successful teacher who knew all about the industry and everything, but also I just loved the music and songwriting. So that's really what gave me a feel of like, oh, I could do this for a job. And he showed me how to book a gig and how to reach out to a magazine for an interview and all this kind of stuff. And he saw something in me. And so I was at the same time doing really horribly socially at school. And my parents one day towards the end of the year, they came to me like they did almost every year and said, Victoria, we're moving again.
And it was like every year?
Pretty much every year. We're moving again, and we want to know if you want to do online high school this time, since you're not having a great time socially. I was obsessed with music. I wasn't obsessed with parties or hanging out, so I really avoided a lot of social situations at that time, which is ironic because now I'm such a like unashamed like social person. But yeah, so we moved to Barcelona. I was really close to my grandparents, and I spent a year studying jazz at the Liceo there, the conservatory. And that was the best time, some of the best times of my life. I would do online school from 6 a.m. to 11:30 a.m., then pack my stuff, my sustain pedal and my microphone, and take the train into the city and do vocal lessons, piano lessons for the rest of the day. That was my life for a year. And I hung out with a bunch of 20-something-year-olds who were all doing music full time. I loved it so much.
There's an incredible scene in Barcelona of young jazz students. There's this big band, the Juan Chamorro big band, that is blowing my mind right now, that the amount of discipline and talent and passion that young people in Barcelona are finding for jazz.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was surrounded by. I'm actually really pleased to hear that you know about that scene. Yeah, I remember going with a bunch of my friends at that program to see Chucho Valdez give like a master class. And it was so cool. It was so cool. I loved those guys. They always like invited me out to play and sing with them at night. And it was really the first time that I got to be socially included for what I loved to do, and surrounded by so many kids who were just, well, not even kids, they were so grown up to me at the time. Crazy now that I'm their age. But they just included me like their pet and always offered me a smoke, which everyone does in Spain, and I never smoked, but they were just really cool.
So all of what you describe is extraordinary. Your childhood already is extraordinary. Growing up, moving year by year, living in all these cities with a completely diverse set of inputs. And, you know, the thing that hasn't even come up yet in your conversation is that you're missing an arm. You were born with something that would set potentially somebody back from pursuing a dream like making music.
Everybody's born with something, you know, and for me, that's my thing. That's one of the many imperfections about me, but it's the one that people can see. I mean, say you're born with a nose that you're self-conscious about, like you're not going to mention it in every conversation, even though it's maybe shaped a lot of how you view yourself. That's hypothetical. Like, yeah, I mean, it's definitely impacted me so much in my life, but I feel like I was born with a personality that is so eager to connect with people and to get out there and do something deliciously brave. And that's it, you know. I mean, if there's one thing that has really enlightened me about being born this way is that I was born into privilege and I have a voice to use. And I want to represent my community of people, the community of people who the able-bodied person would normally find uncomfortable to look at, because the truth is I am in this sort of position where you can look at me and not feel uncomfortable. You know how to talk to me like you would any other person. But if I had a different disability that was on my face, or if I couldn't open my mouth to speak to you, it would be a lot more difficult. And part of what being supposedly disabled has informed me of is, and made me excited about, is bridging the gap between able-bodied people and disabled or differently abled people.
Do you have a memory of feeling that way when you were younger? Is this something that you've sort of come to terms with or come to understand about yourself over time?
Absolutely, yeah. When I was 14, I remember going on a trip with my family, and I wouldn't even leave where we were staying because I felt like everyone was staring at me. I couldn't bear it. I thought it was the end of the world. And looking back, I just think, poor kid. Everyone likes looking at the people around them. And I walk on the street, people will look at my eyes or at my arm, and I'm exploring with my eyes. And it's just so natural to be curious. And that is one distinct moment that was like my self-consciousness at its peak.
Well, you described how you were feeling in Dubai before you went to Barcelona and then before you came here, and you were saying that you were socially struggling.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, that's at that key time in your life when you're totally self-conscious anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Despite whatever physically it may be. Before adolescence, I was a really outgoing kid. Super talkative. I would walk up to any stranger in any room and be quick to make a friend. You know? That was always who I was. And then I went through a sort of dip from 8th grade to about 12th grade, like the rest of my high school years. I do recall a conversation with my mom about, like, I have this memory of when I was a kid of being surrounded by children on a family trip to India, and I just remember them all coming up to me and touching my arm and being like, oh my gosh, like, are you okay? I don't actually remember this memory, but there's a picture of it. I laugh back and I say, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. Let's go play a game. And then they're all like, cool. And then we go play basketball or whatever. And that was always kind of my attitude, is not really being frightened of people's natural reactions, but just guiding them through, this is what I'm going through. I'm cool. I was born this way, and let's have fun.
I think kids are incredible until they're not. You know, I think
they can be so mean.
They can be awful, right?
So awful. I mean, I definitely came across a lot of bullying.
Yeah.
There was one. This is kind of crude. There was one sort of trend that went around in, I think it was middle school, that everyone was calling my arm like a dick arm. And they said that it looked like a penis. And I remember that haunting me for like a year. That was just what people would say, and it was not cool. But it also, you know, kids are kids, and as an adult, it makes me really want to focus on going back to schools and teaching empathy.
Well, I wonder how much of that is learned. I mean,
absolutely.
Not only empathy, but the cruelty. Like, I think that teasing, that bullying behavior is somehow absorbed and taught by kids, you know, that they have to learn how to do that. I think at their core, children accept difference. Yeah,
they're curious and they are inherently good. I think the interesting thing about judgment is that it always stems from self-judgment. So those kids who are criticizing me, we're at the age where you wake up and criticize yourself for everything, and you hate yourself for everything. So naturally, the coping mechanism is to hate others for what imperfections you see in them. I have to be quite forgiving of that, because it's a coping mechanism. You know what I mean? I understand. It doesn't mean I condone it. You should never bully.
Yeah.
But I definitely can see why, if you're confronting so much from your inner critic, why you yourself, your highest self, would actually kind of be brought down to being judgmental of others. That's life. It's a practice. I think as adults we actually have the awareness and the brain development to say, oh, that's not what a good person says or does. You know?
Right. And empathy can be taught and practiced at any stage in life.
Any stage, yeah.
So if you can start it earlier, all the better. When did music come into your life?
My grandma was a piano teacher on my mom's side, and she played for church as well. So whenever we would visit her in the summers, the mountains of Georgia, you know, population 50 of this tiny little town, everybody goes to the church. We'd go every Sunday, and she'd rehearse during the week, and I started singing with the choir very early on. I just loved being surrounded by it. I wanted to do it myself because I saw the beautiful effect that it had on people. And eventually I wanted to play. I wanted to be just like my grandma. And so she sat me down on her lap and showed me what she was playing and showed me the music that she was reading, and it looked like a drawing to me.
Yeah, right.
And that's where it all started. Soon after that, my parents took notice that I was musically inclined and got a piano for me, a little Barbie one, and got me started in lessons, and it was really organic from there. I played trumpet very early on. I was first chair in my brass ensemble in high school, or in middle school. Then started songwriting at 11, discovered Donny Hathaway.
That was the thing that opened you up?
Pretty much, yeah. His vocal performance and the songs, just the song structure. And then came, it sounds really cheesy, but then came just song-wise, Aerosmith. Their songs were amazing to me. Like Crazy, Dream On.
They were beautifully crafted
totally,
songs.
So beautifully crafted. And then I loved U2. Like It's My Life was my anthem in elementary school. Really, I think the first time I remember the artist thing and also positive message thing, impact driven, was Born This Way, Lady Gaga. Because it was literally my story. I was born the way that I was born, and I was like, holy shit, she's speaking to me.
Yeah.
Am I allowed to swear on this thing?
As much as you want.
And she really just touched me straight to the heart. And I said, wow, this isn't about Saturday night. This is appropriate and inspiring and wholesome and still raunchy and reflective all at the same time. And that was so inspirational to me. I said, I want to do that someday, you know?
As you are developing, playing trumpet, playing piano, whatever, writing songs, as we all do, regardless of what physical ability we're born with, you start developing ways to be able to get around on these instruments given what you're given.
Sure.
So when you started playing piano, were you always playing two-armed? Were you playing
No. My first teacher didn't push me to. He was just pushing me to play with my left, and he was doing whatever was on the right. And my mom was like, no way. You must learn how to play with both. And she was the one that pushed me. Thanks, Mom.
And you have some dexterity in your right arm.
I mean, yeah, I can move it like this, but that doesn't really apply when I play. It's more so the way that it's like an inflection that I can play one key very precisely.
Yeah.
Or 2 to 3 based on the tension. And so
But I mean, I saw you on your new song, Drama.
Yeah.
There's a video of you playing solo Rhodes.
Yeah.
And there's just this moment where, like, the last cycle of the tune, you play the minor the four chord as a minor instead of a. And I was like, how does she voice that? Like, all of a sudden, it just seemed like you had to re-voice the chord, and you have no fingers to do it with.
That's all my piano teachers in the past have literally gone and practiced playing with just one finger on the right side to learn how you can do more with less. For that particular chord, I usually, as a rule, my hand goes pretty wide, my left. So I do like a 1, 5, 3.
Tense.
And then I'll do a tension. I'll do tense, and then I'll do a tension with the right.
Got it.
Like a 9 or an 11 or.
Right. But so you can grab 2 notes depending on what it is.
Yeah. So say I'm playing like a G6, like I'll do G, D, B, and then I'll play D, E on the right.
Right. You can grab those 2. You can grab the D and the E together. That's a little cluster that you can grab.
Clusters. It's all about clusters.
It's all about clusters.
Yeah.
So does it change, like, harmonically how you write?
Yeah, for sure. If anything, it makes me really much more traditional in the songwriting sense because I tend to refer to the chords that I understand. I mean, honestly, I'm not as musical as I'd like to be. I can't improvise over a jazz scale or jazz standard. I'm not as classically trained as I'd like to be, but I know how to accompany myself in a way that really serves the song.
Yeah.
When I record, I produce as well, and when I record piano, oftentimes I'll layer. So I'll do like one part in the lower register and then one part or two different tracks on the upper register with slight variations, and then stereo pan them each way so it sounds super full, and it's like I pretend that I have 6 hands instead of 1.
Right, why not?
Yeah.
I'm constantly thinking about the value of limitation.
Sparks creativity.
Exactly. Any limitation around creativity is actually a benefit. So
beneficial. Absolutely. I mean, that's, upon reflection, maybe that's the reason I'm in music, is because of this limitation. Because part of what being human is all about is overcoming. I think that's why we keep pushing forward, and we're always supposedly chasing happiness, is because the chase is what makes us happy. I was always chasing this sort of like, how can I prove myself wrong, or how can I prove the rest of the world wrong? When they think I can't play, I will. In terms of limitation, one of my favorite parts in my memory of music is when I just had GarageBand and I was just using the stock sounds and seeing how far out I could get with just what I had in the program. Most of my artist friends do so much with so little. They film their music videos on their phone, and they record on Logic, very basic. I don't know, there's just I know so many creative people now who are always defying the odds.
Completely. And it's kind of game-changing when you see people working with minimal resources and doing beautiful
amazing
work.
Things, yeah.
It makes you realize that the tools are exactly that. They're just tools. They're a way to execute something, but the creativity is kind of independent of the tools.
Wolfbeck is like an amazing example of that.
Yes, that's a whole deep, long conversation. But, you sort of allude to this, that you have a lot of creative friends right now. You're in LA, but you had been in New York before that, right? Yeah,
I studied at NYU for a year and left to go on tour. I was technically on a leave of absence, but it's kind of extended indefinitely.
So, and you came to the Clive Davis School? What was it like?
It was really interesting. I learned so much as a producer.
Were you in the program as a producer?
I was in the program as a performer, writer, producer. It's kind of an all-encompassing. So you take engineering classes, you take production classes, and business classes, and creative writing, composition, private lessons, that sort of thing. It was a mixed emotion experience for me.
Why?
Because every time I did something out of school, I'd come back to having less friends for whatever reason. And it felt competitive in a way that didn't make sense to me. Like, if you weren't partying and smoking weed, then you weren't doing it right. And all love to people who were doing that in college. Like, that's awesome, creative, cool. But that wasn't my thing. I was going out, I was meeting people, I was trying to book gigs and get press and record and meet people in the city, because 70% of the reason that I wanted to go to that school was to live in the city with the support of the university. So it was a little disappointing, I guess, that I was faced with that sort of block socially, because everyone always talks up the American college experience of, like, you make friends for life and it's the best 4 years you'll ever experience and all this stuff, and enjoy it and soak it in. And here I was, lonely in my dorm room, like binge eating chocolate ice cream, wondering where those friends were and when I was going to make. I mean,
had that been a thing, I can imagine for you that could have been like an image your whole life. Like, when I finally get to college, I'm going to make these friends, because you're moving every year, right?
Exactly.
So finally, I'm going to get somewhere. I'm going to meet these people. These are going to be my people.
Yeah, these are going to. Yeah. And also, having experienced that year-long program in Barcelona, being 10 years younger than everybody else, even though it was socially awesome, you still don't feel like you're one of the buddies. I
mean, was there anywhere along the way, but pre-Barcelona, was there anywhere that you went that, like, if you think that was the place, if my parents would have let us stay there, I would have chosen to stay there. Those were my people. That was my place.
I had my people in Madrid, but then they all became middle schoolers, and they all changed. So no, I don't really regret anywhere. I actually loved moving around a lot, and it made me really good at making friends quickly.
Yes.
I did the Berklee College of Music 5-week summer performance program. That socially, as a 15-year-old, was the best. It was 5 weeks. Those were my people.
Yeah.
Those were like the other 17-ish year olds who were all about music, but not in a way that said, I think you think that you're better than me, so I'm not going to hang out with you because I have an assumption that you think you're better than me.
And you felt that when you got to New York, that people thought you were vibing them, that you thought you were better than them.
Yeah, which I really did not. I wanted to be as cool as them.
Yeah.
They all grew up in the States. They all were the latest on the trends, the latest with the fashion. I felt one step behind in every sense. So that's part of the reason that I went out to gig and to sort of build my profile online, which is, social media is so interesting because it's not exactly who you really are. And a lot of what I put out during that time, some of my loneliest moments, were I'm killing it at the music game. And I'm actually really glad that I faked it a little bit then. You put that energy out like I'm killing it, or you actually feel like you were killing it? No, I put the energy out that I was like doing shit, even though I was alone in my dorm room, sad. Totally. And playing sad songs. But by doing so, I connected with a lot of the people who were hustling too, in LA, in New York, across the board. And that's how I found my people. Like, I have an amazing community of people in New York and LA who I literally met through Instagram. Yeah. And they're authentic relationships. I hang out with them. I hire them as bandmates. I'm so connected to the people that I desire to be connected with. And so again, like, looking back, I'm not mad at the fact that those college people the students who I wanted so desperately to be friends with, neglected me a little bit, because that led me to the right circles. I think everything happens for a reason, As it stands, NYU as an institution is amazing. I spent every day taking advantage of the resources, showing up at 8 a.m. to the recording studio, straight A student, loved the library, amazing library. But again, maybe it's all in my head, and I definitely don't want to make myself sound like a victim, but socially, whenever it's been an academic setting, I have not thrived. But in the real world, I do just fine. So it's interesting, that one.
Yeah, you said it. Having to move, actors often go through these kinds of traumas. Like when you talk to a lot of actors, they moved a lot when they were younger. They had to like figure out how to make friends quickly, either reinvent themselves or find a sort of a shorthand to like express who they were very quickly. And I'm not saying that it's acting to sort of show up and be friendly, but it is certainly an acquired skill that you learn.
Yeah, for sure. It's part of it is being on display, right? And wanting to have a voice in a room.
Right.
Being outgoing definitely helps.
Totally. And it sounds like you were. I mean, it sounds like you showed up with this like, menu of stuff. And one of them was this enormous gift at being just like comfortable in a room and outgoing.
Some rooms, yeah. It's so interesting. Most rooms I'm so comfortable and happy to be in, but I do have distinct memories of almost showing up in a room as myself, my authentic, outgoing, cool self, and then for whatever reason the vibe just shuts me down.
Yeah.
And that was freshman year in high school.
Yeah.
And freshman year in college.
So you knew it was time to get out of there, and you found a way, in part because you had started sharing videos online.
Exactly.
And you went to LA?
Towards the end of the year at NYU, I had posted a guitar playing video, and an artist, Michael Franti, had reached out. Michael Franti...
From Spearhead.
Yeah, from Spearhead, reached out and said, "Hey, I'm Michael. I'm an impact-driven artist. I love what you do. Would you want to come to Nashville and write a song with me?"
Is that where he is now?
No, but he wrote his record in Nashville. So I remember it being a Thursday at school, and I had a final on Friday, but I was like, fuck it, let's go. And he flew me to Nashville, and we wrote a song on that Friday, stayed up until like 3 a.m. And it felt really cool to be doing like this weekend trip in the midst of the freshman year. What was so strange was, I know I keep going back to this, but I did some really cool things that year. I went to and sang and spoke at a Toyota conference in Greece over the weekend. So I was in Greece over the weekend and then back to New York Monday morning for classes. And I just remember being the star of the show there and then coming back to feeling totally invisible in class, coming in and nobody saying hello to me and me trying to be outgoing. And, it was just, it felt like a mini Hannah Montana story, like I'm a star somewhere and then I'm totally invisible somewhere else, know?
Yeah, but what's funny about it is that you're invisible in the school where people are studying to do what you're doing.
Right.
They want, I think that's probably part of what's going on is they want that, they crave that.
Yeah.
They desire
so if I
that.
talked about it at all, if I were excited about whatever I was doing and talking about it, they would shut down and leave.
When Michael Franti said that thing about being an impact-driven artist, was that a phrase or a concept that you were familiar with already when he said that?
Not at all, and actually those weren't the exact terms that he used. That's really a term that I've recently learned about, taking part in conversations about disability representation.
Tell me about it. I haven't heard that phrase before.
So to be impact-driven is to have a recurring theme throughout your mission to basically affect change for the better. Quite simply, mine is just by showing up, I'm representing disabled people because I'm disabled and I'm doing what I love. I don't take that responsibility lightly. It's actually really what I've come to love it. The fact that I can provide a voice for maybe someone who doesn't normally have the chance to be seen. I'm being seen a lot lately, a lot more than ever anyway. And I really want to keep in mind the fact that, as a kid, I would have loved to have seen someone asymmetrical in the media,
I have to just confess something to you, because when I first got the pitch email on you, there was so much about you before I heard the music that I actually thought, like, I almost wish I wouldn't have known any of that. When I finally got another friend wrote to me the other day and he was like, "You need to look at this." And I watched these videos of you and I thought the music was so great. Oh, and also there's this whole other layer of conversation and story and narrative of this person, but I would rather find the music first.
Me too.
And then hear the story.
I know.
It seems like one of the challenges of being an impact-driven artist is that, as you say, it would have been really helpful to you if you had seen somebody asymmetrical. But what would have really been helpful is if that person was also doing great work that was connecting with everybody, you know, as valid and beautiful work, not because or in spite of their asymmetry, but in addition to it.
Yeah, that's been a battle for me the whole time. I don't want to be the one-armed singer.
Right.
You know what I mean? That's not what I'm doing here. I do music because I love it, and I want people to love what they hear. But honestly, I think in today's climate, social, political climate, people could use a little bit of hope, a little bit of inspiration. And if I'm just a couple seconds out of their day, if that's what they get, I'm happy to share that with people, to give that to people, to say, I overcame this and I'm loving my life. I'm grateful for what I do have. I'm not pining after what I don't. That's a lesson that I think a lot of people don't get to learn until later on in life. So it's almost like a jump start for me. But I definitely have resented it being such a huge part of the conversation before, and it also makes me wonder, am I artist enough without it? Would I be valued as an artist if not for this pitch, you know?
I think it's a really tricky thing because, you know, we're in an political, social, cultural moment of identity, and you have a lot of identities. Right. Your pitch is filled with all different kinds of identities. And to an extent, like, I think to myself, well, yeah, it should be. Those are all who you are. You have a deep well of personhood, you know? And you have to break through. I mean, everybody's using whatever it is that they have to break through the noise, because the bottom line is you just want people to just take those few seconds and like listen to you, you know, whatever it takes to get listened to. I understand that. Yeah, I can imagine what a challenge it must be for you to try to figure out, like, what do I
add without this thing?
Well, I don't think there's any question. I think that video of drama of you playing is so brilliantly executed because of the way it's shot. I mean, I don't know if this was a conversation that you had or not when it was put together, but it's shot in this incredible way because of the way your arms are. If you don't know anything about you, you hear the music for a long time before you see anything that would say like, wow, that's incredible.
That's cool. Well, I mean, that's definitely become, first of all, on a total superficial level, I like my left side of my face better. So I always film from that side. I mean, if you look at my Instagram, you scroll through it, or my YouTube channel, a lot of it doesn't show my arm. And a lot of it, some of it does, some of it doesn't. It's not really a conscious thing. I think for a long time I posed very specifically so you couldn't see it, especially during those teenage years. But now it doesn't really come across as a thing. I have received that feedback before, that people will be like, oh, I didn't even notice until the very end of the song. And that's what I like to hear. That is awesome. You know, or for someone to discover me on Spotify and then find out later on. It's just, you know, I don't know. People listen to Stevie Wonder because he's great, not because he's blind, you know? And that's kind of the same, not to ever compare myself to Stevie fucking Wonder, but you know what I'm saying? Like, he's not a blind singer. He's Stevie Wonder. And that's one very minuscule part of his experience, you know? So Instagram, I mean, I guess I feel kind of silly that I didn't even like spend any time on your Instagram, because it sounds like that's where like so much of your creation is happening right now. Absolutely. Creation and connection, for sure.
So tell me about that. Like, first of all, Instagram, for the most part, especially when you're starting, is limited to a certain amount of time. You can't put you know, now you can put longer songs on, but like,
you couldn't before.
Right.
The last year that I did normal high school, was when social media came into play for me. There was one week in the school when it was called Week Without Walls, and you could choose from a few different programs that were a week long. And I spent a week learning the ropes on how to make a Facebook page, how to make an Instagram profile, what the importance of making content is, and how to brand, essentially, in a sense. And I took a lot of interest in it because, keep in mind, again, I wasn't thriving socially. So I had a lot of time to sort of, I was doing all this production stuff with my music and playing and writing all the time, and nobody was really seeing or hearing it except for my brother down the hall, or my mom, who I'd forced by the hand to come listen to every song. And I wanted to share it with people, and so I started an Instagram page, I started a YouTube channel, and I just went for it. I learned that lighting is like good lighting is important. I got my brother who does photography to film me and take some pictures. Got my best friend to take some pictures, and it sort of grew really organically from there. Very early on, 14, 15 years old, I knew how to communicate my excitement, my thoughts, my true self over as much as possible over social media. And it grew very slowly over the course of 4 or 5 years, but I loved seeing the numbers go up. It didn't define me, and it didn't make me feel like any type of way other than, oh, that's cool, that's exciting. And just to share the news with my brother, like, we got 100 views today, how cool.
Would you make any adjustments to what you posted based on what the response, what people were liking?
Honestly, as a woman, I found myself focusing on looking more attractive for people and maybe sexier, or editing a certain way, like color editing, and because I found that like bathing suit pictures got more likes and whatever, and that was kind of sad. But it was always the music that got most engagement. At NYU, when I spent a lot of time in my dorm room, I started making videos, and I did covers of people's songs, and one got picked up, a Bruno Major cover got picked up by this channel called Pickup Jazz. Mm-hmm. They repost indie artists' covers and songs and stuff. And Bruno reached out and said, I loved this cover. And then I started doing that so that I could make up for the lack of social life with the recognition from famous singers. And I wouldn't tell anybody, but I would just keep it to myself, like, yes, I have this win, I'm respected. Yeah, it made me really excited to be respected as a musician, and to get praised. And so I would just keep posting music stuff, ideas, and I'd start reaching out to collaborators, and it was just fun. It was just really fun. It was so simple, didn't have anything to do with the industry.
How does that change? That's the thing. It doesn't have anything to do with the industry, and on the other hand, it has everything to do with the industry.
Right. Yeah,
it is the
true.
industry.
That's true.
You're coming up in a time when it's kind of hard to know, like, when you're just fooling around and playing a cover and when you're actually like doing your career. Like,
right.
They're kind of all the same thing.
Yeah, and the curious part is sometimes you have more success with the fooling around than with the actual career work. I remember filming a Stevie Wonder cover in 10 minutes with my brother, and it got 10 million views on Facebook. It was the first cover I ever posted there, and that's actually what led to me meeting Stevie Wonder. Was his daughter caught wind of the video and passed it on. He listened to it and didn't know that I had one arm. So when we met, it's funny because he like reached out his hand to shake my hand and grabbed my arm, and it was hilarious.
And what did he say? He
was like, "What's going on? I don't understand." And then I explained, "I'm Victoria. I posted a cover that I think you saw." And he said, "Oh yeah." And I said, I was born without part of my right arm, and you're super inspiring to me, given the adversity you've overcome and how joyful you are in your music and in your life. It's really influenced me a lot." And he said, "That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. And keep making music, honey. Just keep at it." And that was that conversation. And that was through social media. I met my manager through social media because he was Emily King's manager. And I posted a cover of her song, and he reached out saying, "It's so dope, and do you want to open for Emily at the Apollo Theater?" And all this it was just super organic. And at this point, it's all just really like exciting, simple. I'm in class, I get out, I read this note, and I'm like, holy shit, you know what I mean?
I mean, at some point you must be thinking, I think it's time for me to leave school. I think this is obviously not the best use of my time.
Right. Yeah, that point came, I didn't really plan on leaving school until after the summer with Michael Franti. And then he said, "We need you, like we just put a song out together. I need you to be on the road with me the next 6 months." And I said, okay, I guess NYU will be on the back burner. And then after that, I was invited to do an artist residency in Fort Worth, spent 6 months writing my EP there, and then moved to LA. And I'm technically still on a leave of absence, but as disappointed as my parents might be to hear that I'm not going back for now, I'm really happy where I am.
I think you should tell them that you'll go back when you're teaching there.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a good one.
So LA seems like this beautiful, fertile place right now. I read something in your bio where you said, "I finally feel like I'm being surrounded by people who like are holding me to my highest self, that are like keeping the bar really high.
Yeah.
Is that happening in LA, or is that just all over the world? Those are your people, or did you particularly feel that community when you moved to LA?
I feel like the community that I met in New York outside of school and the community that I've met in LA, those are my people.
Yeah.
The thing about LA is that it's so relaxed and forward thinking. Everyone is just so accepting and creative, and every time I have a songwriting session, it feels like a play date.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it feels like I'm just hanging out with my buddies and we're being creative together. Go to the beach, you know, get some sunshine, go on a hike, and it really does feel like home. It's become home very quickly for me. I'm so happy there. It's hard to describe. And it really does feel like the first time that I'm grounded. I'm an adult who is doing music for her life, and I'm surrounded by just really understanding people who are wholesome and also so ridiculous and crazy and fun. I'm just having a lot of fun, enjoying my youth, you know?
Well, right. That's what you say. I'm an adult, and then at the same time, I'm enjoying my youth. I mean, there's another aspect of it that I realized talking to you. I was even going to tell you, like, before you came, I think you're the second youngest person I've ever interviewed on the podcast.
Who's the youngest?
Jacob Collier.
Oh, cool. When did you interview him? A while ago, I guess.
I mean, I think he was 18 or 19.
Awesome.
He was just starting, and I was in London, and I found him, and I went out to the house, and
he's so crazy.
He was coming home from school. I mean, his mom made me tea while he was coming home from school.
Awesome.
And, you know, he's another example of a career that came out of these videos that he made in his house. You know, I think about what kind of pressure in terms of time there is on a young artist today, because, you know, your whole development is happening in real time. You know, you don't get to sort of like get it together and then show up in the world publicly. You're sort of getting it together in front of people, which I guess is also really part of what's compelling and interesting to your fans and to people, is that they get to watch you.
They get to grow with you.
And they get to grow with you. But it's different. Yeah.
I've watched so many artists that I love grow and transform and change. I appreciate every change that an artist goes through, or how much more comfortable they do interviews over time and all that kind of stuff, how their style changes, even clothing-wise. And I've always been a big fan personally, like just a fan period as a teen girl of many artists, many singers. So it actually is quite bizarre to be, this week I'm on a press trip to New York, and it still feels a little bit like I'm playing, like this isn't real.
Because you're playing a role.
I'm playing a role a little bit. And I've watched so many interviews for so long that doing them myself, it just feels bizarre. You know what I mean? I'm like, who's going to listen to this and be like, oh my God, I'm such a big fan of Victoria. I find her so interesting. And this is not out of lack of confidence, but it's just like, it doesn't feel like anybody's going to, you know what I mean? It's just weird. I've glamorized people.
Yes.
Like Tori Kelly and Alessia Cara and Demi Lovato for so long, and watched every interview myself, that it's hard to imagine somebody else doing the same for me, you know?
Do you think in watching those interviews, it prepares you, like you kind of understand what's expected, that you have to sort of be real and present, you have to be revealing and also mysterious? I mean, do you have a sense, like, what, in the same way that you study artists, you know, and you learn from the way they sing, performance, like, do you feel like that's part of what you've been studying also, is how to do that?
Maybe subconsciously, but more so, if anything, I think it's been a bit to my detriment, because I compare. And so when I'm doing an interview, I'll be way too hyper conscious of like, am I being as funny as Miley Cyrus was with this? You know what I mean? Or whatever. Yeah. And the amount of third story podcasts that I've listened to, it's more like I get too in my head if I think about how other artists interview. Yeah. Whereas with their performance and their songwriting style, that's all very playful to me.
Yeah.
But this is very vulnerable, this context. And I try not to think too much about how another artist would do it, because I just want to be as myself as I can authentically be, if that makes sense.
100% it does. And I think it's probably the same. I mean, the reason I'm asking you is, again, I'm just realizing all of the aspects that you're kind of responsible for, or a part of the process of becoming an artist of your generation. Like, I'm old enough that the people that like got started when I got started basically are sitting around going, oh my God, we're supposed to be like video people now, and also communicating on social media with who and what, what is this? Over time, the skill set has changed. And on the one hand, I think it left some people behind who just didn't have the tools,
the second
to do
nature,
that.
like tools. Yeah.
Totally. And on the other hand, your creativity, your artistry, your vision can expand now if you grow up understanding, like, oh, I think it's amazing that you said, well, the first thing I realized is good lighting. Like, that happened at the same time you were figuring out how to write a song. Basically, you were like learning how to light yourself.
Mm-hmm. But also from another perspective, it makes you question, if I hadn't spent time with social media and on my devices, how many more hours would I have spent honing my craft as a writer or as an instrumentalist, But these are the things. I still have many artist friends my age who reject social media altogether. I've actually, I said I've always considered it fun, but just this year, as it's become more serious and I've moved to LA and now this is the full-time, it's no longer just playing for fun anymore. This is the real deal, and I have a team and it's all high stakes. There's something in me that's rejecting social media, and I don't want to put everything on display. I just spoke about this earlier today, but it's this fine balance between, do I want to be observed or do I want to observe? How do I choose which one I want to do in my life? And is it possible to do both as an artist who is constantly on display? And when you're an artist who's engaging with the world like I am, you are always on display. Mm-hmm. Someone's always got their phone out, or I've got my phone out, and everything's being captured. And it's tricky because there is a very meditative sort of hippy-dippy part of me that just wants to sit back and watch. And that's been sort of something that I've been conversing with myself on, is how do I absorb completely what I'm living right now, and then also have enough personality to please the people who are watching me.
Yeah, once you're aware of it, it changes things, right? It
does, yeah.
I interviewed this singer Alani in Paris last month, and she said something very similar. She said, as an artist, my job is to observe the world and then communicate what I see through my work. Now, what you're bringing to the conversation is, okay, well, how do I observe it if I'm the one being observed?
Exactly.
Which I think is a challenge. And then you have this other layer of it that I keep thinking about, which is like, to be an impact-oriented artist, is that how
Impact-driven.
Impact-driven. By virtue of you showing up and being whatever you are, writing whatever song you write, sing whatever song you sing, is that the impact? Or are you also having this other conversation with yourself about, like, is this part of the message I want to be sending? Does this song represent and make the impact that I want to make?
I write the songs that I want to write.
Yeah.
I definitely don't craft my songs around, is this going to be positive messaging?
Right.
Like, if I will always remain true to the fact that I let out what I need to let out through my art. There are certain circles that you can get involved in. So yes, by virtue of showing up as a disabled person, that's part of the impact. Someone's going to see and be like, oh my God, I thought I couldn't play piano, but I can't, or whatever it might be. But then internally, more so as like an entity, me taking part of the reason I'm in New York, other than for press, is to take part in a conversation with some senior travel executives and an inclusive design expert and the ADA about how travel experiences can be more inclusive. Because I've struggled, and I know a lot of differently abled people who have struggled with their airport experience, not being accommodated the way that they deserve to be. And why shouldn't every person's experience traveling be as comfortable as the next, It's not even so much about comfort, it's just support.
Yeah.
It can be hard if you don't have arms or legs to get through with all your stuff. There are certain services that cater to, but they're just not perfect. And the design itself in every airport is not perfect, Anyway, so that's what sort of going to these conferences and speaking internally at companies and at high schools, saying a variety of different things with these internal conversations, sometimes it's more policy driven. And then otherwise at high schools, I like to keep it simple. I show up and say, I've been through a really difficult time. I made it out. Whatever you're going through, you're going to make it out too. And whatever you look like, whatever you're feeling, you are accepted. You are enough. You're more than enough. You're capable of doing excellent things in your life. And you should try your best. Don't give up on yourself, show up for your day every day. And if all you have the strength to do today is wake up and get out of bed, that's all you need to do. I have a close loved one who copes with mental illness, bipolar, severe social anxiety, depression, and I've seen him be bedridden for days, and then on top of that, guilt himself for being so. And that is another layer of my mission, is not just me missing an arm, but also seeing how someone's, I guess you could call it a disability or limitation internally, the one that you can't see.
Totally.
Yeah.
I mean, when you gave me the example of my nose, like, you said, imagine that you hated your nose, and every room that you walked into, you thought people were judging your nose, which is, I mean, look, I could make you a list of things physically that I'm not happy about on my body. We all have that stuff.
Exactly.
But what I was thinking about when you said that is, but there's so much that people don't see. That's in a sense where the message is totally universal, that we all are walking into rooms with our perceived disabilities or our real disabilities. In your case, it's a physical thing.
A physical thing. But for my very close loved one, it's a totally invisible thing. And he's struggled a lot with lack of support there.
Yeah.
And so I write songs about that a lot, about my relationship with him and how I see him, how I value him, because in my eyes, he is perfect and he is beautiful. I wouldn't change a single thing, even with the struggles that he goes through. Like, it makes him more eloquent. He's an excellent writer. He's an excellent thinker. He does human rights work. And without everything that he's experienced, he wouldn't be that person. So you can't resent what has made you.
Well, you said something earlier, I'm not focused on what I don't have. I'm focused on what I do have. I'm celebrating what I do have.
Yeah.
We all crave things that we don't have. We all strive. That's what setting goals is.
Yeah. I remember when I first met Andrew, my manager, he and I had a dinner basically discussing what my goals were. And I have a lot of goals. At least I did at that point. Right now, I'm a little bit more moment driven. I'm like, I just want to enjoy my moment. But I do go through a definite spurts of energy, especially on the airplane when I have no distractions, of writing down what I want in my life. But it was interesting, that conversation, because by the end of it, he was like, do you have any non-career driven goals?
Because everything you said was career.
Everything was career driven. Every single one. And it made me think a lot. Because that's always what I've considered exciting, is those small stepping stones leading to bigger things and meeting bigger people and collaborating in bigger ways in music. But that conversation, ironically, being in the professional...
With your manager.
Was, he said, what are you striving for that's not part of your career? And I had never thought about it, And that's part of really when I wanted to become more sensitive to and aware of how my message could impact people. But even that's part of the career. I'm still thinking about it, what do I want outside of music? And it's kind of fallen into my lap that I'm living in LA and love the people that I'm around. That's been a goal for a long time, is to feel at home with my social environment. Yes. But in terms of wanting kids or wanting a house, or I don't think in that way.
I mean, you're young. You're so young that you have a lot of time to think about this. I don't think I would have had a handle on that.
Yeah.
Until I was even a lot older. But and there's a part of me that still thinks that when you're a creative person, there's never a moment in your day when you're not being professional, because everything that you do is sort of absorbed into your process, into what you think about affects the work that you do.
That's the interesting part about being friends with mostly people who are full-time artists, is that they all relate to that experience. But when you're friends with someone who has a full-time job, they have who they are, how they identify, and then they have the job that they show up for a few hours a day, That's a totally different thing. I'm 100% my job.
Right, and your job is 100% you. I think that there's a lot of value, and this is how I was raised, in having a diversity socially of people that aren't all living in the creative bubble. It just gives you a deeper sense of the world.
Yeah. I definitely have, actually my two closest friends, they're not in music.
Yeah.
And they're childhood best friends.
Yeah.
One of which I met in second grade and the other who I met through online school. But one does psychology, and it's actually been amazing to see her evolution in life, because she went from being a model and she fell out of modeling because she hated it so much, and now she guides meditations and she's like a spiritual psychologist.
Wow.
I've felt envious of her because she has a boyfriend. She lives in one place. She's lived in that place for many years, and she's so grounded and happy. And then my other closest friend, she's doing university, and I've also felt like, I wonder what that would be like right now to still be in university, because I only did a year. And she's so stressed out. Like, she's so all over the place, and she doesn't know what she's going to do after school. And having these two relationships of the person who's still in university but completely happy with her life, and the person who's in university and totally stressed out and unhappy, it's just really interesting. I don't know, because I feel like I'm in a totally different place, and sometimes I envy or think about what would it be like if I had a normal life, and then I realize that however you feel about your life is really up to you. It's not really up to the circumstance.
We talk about, like, okay, what do you want? What are your goals? What would your goals be? And you don't pine for what you don't have, be in your moment and love what you have. And in your case, the thing that you don't have, that you have never had, is a normal life. A normal as you define normal, like be on a path, live in the same place your whole life, have this group of friends, like go to college. Yeah. From day one, that was not the story.
You're right.
So that becomes the thing that you sort of like hold up. It's not, you already met Stevie Wonder. He digs you. Stevie Wonder, like, you go to bed and wake up the next day, Stevie Wonder digs you. You've like got that one. That's already. But the one thing is, like, I didn't have a normal life.
Yeah, I think about that so much, but I've never really put it into those words, that from day one, every facet of my life, from my physical body to my living situation to what I did for school, my timeline, none of it is normal. But what is normal anyway, No,
but I do wonder about your physical body and the physical space that you were in were both so unusual that you didn't define either one of them as being the dominant thing. They were both happening, and also talent. And then you also had talent. Like, you had these three huge things. You're like a musical gift, a physical disability, and you moved around all the time. And any one of those things could easily define a person for their whole life. And they, they would just be like, this is my thing.
That's so interesting. Thank you for making me sound interesting.
Thank you for being so interesting.
Oh, man. Well,
so where do we go from here? What happens next?
I mean, do you want to talk about the music a little bit?
Yeah.
So you were saying before about having multiple identities.
Yes.
My whole EP is about that. It's called Victoria, and it's all about the inner conversations I'm having at 21. Each song is sort of my relationship with the world and with myself in a different context. So Drama, the first single off the project, is really me standing up to my inner critic, who is lying to me all the time, saying that I suck.
Oh, that's you that you're talking to.
It's me. And it's also, there have been external bullies, but the worst one is always the one inside your mind, Nobody can bully me as much as I've bullied myself. I heard that quote once. I can't remember who said it, but it was like so true. So that song is about that, me standing up, brushing off my inner critic, saying, you know what, I'm going to do what I want, despite what you're telling me that I can or can't do. And despite the opinions that you're casting on me, I'm going to do my best, and show up as my highest self. There's a song called Victoria on the EP, which is named after that song. I wrote it initially I don't know how deep you want to get into this.
Let's do it.
Okay. So initially the song was called Magnolia. I had found a street in Fort Worth that was Magnolia, and I thought that was a really cool word. And then I met a dog that was named Magnolia, and I was like, this is no coincidence. I must write a song. And so I wrote this melody. It goes, Magnolia, lay down to anymore, Magnolia. So it's like that sort of thing. And and I made a voice memo of it, and I wrote the song all dedicated to a dog. So there were lyrics like, you listen but don't talk, you're better than everybody else. It's you and me against the world, this kind of thing. And I was in the session with my friend Martin, who I finished the song with, and he left to pee with the door open, and he was like whistling and singing, and then he's saying, Victoria, and then he like ran back to the room. I was like, holy shit, we have to make the song about you. And we flipped everything in a sense to be me talking to myself in the best friend context, and saying it's you and me against the world. We can't trust anybody out there. They're all out to get us. Let's hide in our house forever and like just make music and lock the doors and keep them locked out. So that's that song. And then there's a song called Second, where I stand up for what I deserve in a relationship context. I say, I shouldn't be placed second. I shouldn't be your second choice. I should be the first one. And then the last song on the EP is called Favor. It's possibly my favorite song that I've written. It's a folkloric tune. It's the demo that we first made. We've tried re-recording it many times, but ultimately it's the demo with the washer and dryer in the back that stuck. Of course. And the sirens, the New York sirens. It's very self-deprecating, and it's asking someone a favor of fall in love with me, but all just saying like, I know I'm trouble, like I know I'm cause for concern, and all these lyrics like, I feel like the devil, but can you just do me a favor and fall in love with me instead?
So I hear what you're saying, that it's a series of dialogues.
I mean, when you listen to Victoria, which will be out in the new year, it definitely does sound a little bit manic, a little bit crazy. Yeah. And
are you writing already for the next thing? Are you still writing?
I am. I'm always writing.
Yeah.
I've sort of taken a very experimental turn. So every session that I've done lately, it might be with a pop writer, it might be with a friend, whoever it is. I go in and I'm like, dude, I'm just making whatever comes out, no filter. Let's do that. And then some cool shit comes out.
I think that's so good. You know, I stepped away from co-writing because I felt so jaded in co-writes. Like I couldn't figure out who I was writing for. And I did an interview last year with Donovan Woods. Do you know who he is? He's a Canadian songwriter. Okay. And he said, the only thing that somebody's going to feel like they want to record is something that you want for yourself so bad that it's just like suffering to let anybody else sing it.
Yeah.
If you aren't feeling that way about what you're writing, why would anybody else want to feel that way about it? Like you have to give that much of yourself in every co-write.
That's a great way to put it.
And I thought, right, that's the problem. Like if you go
into the problem.
If you go into a co-write and you're like, yeah, we're going to like write some shit for somebody, or we're going to like, I'm going to write some pop thing for you or whatever. Yeah. And you don't have that motivation, that intention of like, it's going to break my heart to either to give this to somebody. Mm-hmm. So that's why if you walk in and just say like, look, I just have to be totally me, whatever that means right now.
Right. Like, let's just have fun. Yeah. Co-writing's been such an interesting journey for me, because the first time I was thrown into my first batch of co-writes, it was like 20 in a month or something ridiculous. And I didn't know who any of the people were. I was signed to a development deal that did not last. Mm-hmm. And I hated it. I hated writing songs that had nothing to do with my life, that felt so dishonest and were just to conform to some mold that people were telling me was best for me. And it wasn't until I quit writing altogether and I backpacked through Australia for 6 months that I discovered songwriting again on my own, because I was experiencing so much as a 17, 18-year-old. I wanted to capture it. I wanted to have a time capsule of my life, my emotional moments. And so it came back around. I And then when I started co-writing again, I didn't want it to be with people who had won Grammys. I wanted it to be with the people that I loved most. And that's what changed it for me, was getting into a room with people that I trusted, people who knew me, or who I started to reach out to and wanted to collaborate because I chose them, not because a label chose them for me.
I think when you look at the most successful songwriter, producers, artists, whatever, at the core is always a very small, close group of collaborators.
Exactly.
People that really trust each other. And
work with each other for years and years and years. Bruno Mars's team, Alessia Cara's team, her band has been the same for 7 years or whatever. Dua Lipa always has the same photographer, and Billie Eilish tours and writes and produces with her brother. Yeah, and that's so dope.
So you had a development deal before you were 16 or 17.
I was 17.
So how do you feel about the business? I mean, what's your relationship like with the business? You've already been through deals where people were kind of trying to
push brand on me. Yeah. It's been a journey. I mean, that was the first time that it wasn't fun for me. It was the first time I was like, what am I doing? And then I like to think about it more as not a business, but just a community of friends. And now that I've grown up a little bit, I've found people that make shit happen, but also are good people. And that's what I'm surrounding myself with. So I feel like the business is whatever you make of it. The only aggravating thing is sometimes I do have to sit in meetings where old white guys mansplain things to me, like when they have no idea what I've lived through, they have no idea what I stand for, and they don't give me a chance to speak and say, like, here's...
On your behalf.
Yeah. So I guess in that sense, I've valued independent artistry more so than ever, because I get to choose exactly what I want to share. There are frustrating parts with being independent, like numbers don't always go your way, you know?
In what sense?
Sometimes things flop when you put a lot of work into them.
Right.
And then sometimes things blow up that you're totally like embarrassed about. You know? Blow up, like go insanely viral, and you're like, why did this go viral? I don't like this.
But do you think that if you weren't independent that would still be, like, I feel like labels and big teams also, I mean, they maybe have more resources to put behind something, but if something is going to flop, it might just flop.
It might just flop. Yeah. I can't even imagine what it's like to be signed to a major label.
Yeah.
I just can't imagine. Really, I'm just surrounded by artists who are indie,
totally.
Live with 5 roommates and trying to get playlisted.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like that's the people that I surround myself with most. So that's the industry for me. And it feels more homey than ever. Like it feels more comfortable and intimate. But you know what? I don't really know if I have like a steady opinion. Some days I'm like, I love my job. I wouldn't change this for the world. And then other days I'm like, dude, I'm tired. You know what I mean? Like I'm just.
And you're 21.
Yeah. yeah, I know. Shocking. But you know, I've always been on the go. Like I said towards the beginning, I feel like I've sometimes lived a few lifetimes in one because of how much things have changed.
Man, I am blown away by this conversation with you.
Thank you.
You know, you are an incredible person.
Wow, thanks. You too.
And
I love this podcast.
There it was, my friends. Victoria Canal. What an incredible human being. Talented, funny, and old soul. What a pleasure. I'll be back again before you know it with another deep dive. Until then, I'll talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye, Amanda.